Go ahead and grab a seat, grab a seat, grab a seat. And as you do, as we get into the message, I just want to tell you about a friend of mine. So recently, a good friend of mine lost somebody that was really close to them. And it was a friend of theirs and a really close friend of theirs, somebody that they looked up to and somebody that they had a ton of respect for. And they just passed away, and it was like sudden. They had no warning, they had no heads up. And this wasn't the first time it had happened. See, because like 2 months before, they had lost somebody else that was really close to them. That time it was a family member and somebody that they respected, and they tried to work to help connect with the family, because she was one of those family members that was a bit isolated. And so this person I just knew had taken that first death really, really hard. And I was concerned that the second one is somebody that's even closer to them. I think they're going to have a really hard time dealing with it. And I felt this pressure to reach out to them and call them and connect them. I just wanted to help. I mean, that was a good thing. But I also felt like a pressure to say something, I am a pastor. So I was I need to be able to encourage them, say something that's going to mean something. But I didn't want that pressure. I don't know if you've ever felt this. I didn't want that pressure to say something to cause me to say something really stupid. Because I know there's been a lot of moments in my life where I've been hurting and people have just said something because they had a pressure to say something, but what they said was just ridiculous. And I was you'd have just done better off to shut up. And so I didn't want to be kind of caught there. And so I was just man, I don't know what to do. But I got on the phone with them, and I was praying about it before the phone call. I was praying with them during the phone call. I was praying by myself during the phone call, just trying to say, God, help me not say anything dumb. Help me give them something that's actually going to be meaningful. But what I think I got was what they said more than what I said. As I listened, I heard them vent and cry, emotionally bleed out some. And they said something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about since I heard it. And it wasn't because it was some grand statement that was well-constructed. It was just raw, and it was real. And I think that's what really helped me connect with it. But the statement was quite simple. They just said this. They said, I don't feel like I can get my mind around it. And I don't know how to process the death of somebody that I loved. It's not just the sudden loss of a friend. It's the moment when your spouse says that while you've been working on the marriage, they've been trying to escape the marriage. And now you find yourself sitting at work wondering what you could have done differently, what went wrong, and what or who they could be doing right now. It's the diagnosis you weren't expecting, the bank account so far in the red that black seems impossible. It's the friend that loves you one week and the next week acts like you don't even exist, and you begin to wonder, am I even worth being around? Have you ever been there? Struggling, frustrated, hurting, deeply, deeply hurting, and just felt like you couldn't even begin to explain or wrap your mind around what you were experiencing. This morning's message is for you. I feel like it's kind of the wisdom that God gave me out of my prayer requests. What do we do in the moments when life just doesn't seem fair or right or just? What do we do when the world just feels dark? Real dark. Walking into stuff, dark. I get the world's going to be dark sometimes. What I want to know, and I actually sent this message to somebody earlier this week, and here's their question. I get that the world's going to be dark, but why does the dark feel so damn dark? Why is it so heavy? Why can't I seem to escape it? And what can I do in the moment? Because in the moment, I just feel like I'm frantically searching for a light switch, and even when I find it, it just flicks up and down and doesn't change anything. And I don't know about you, but in those moments, I begin to feel like the light switch, disconnected from everything, wondering if I can even process what I'm experiencing or if I could ever get through it. Are the lights ever coming back on? And if I'm not careful, I begin to just project it all on God. A good God wouldn't let darkness happen this much. I kind of get some Bible verses in there because I've been to church before, and I'll inject them into my life, and I'm well, God is a God of light, so if I'm in darkness, I must be away from him. I can become self-attacking about it. But here's the reality. I think the darkness isn't always bad. I'm not saying it's not painful. I'm saying it's not tough to deal with. I'm not saying it doesn't suck. I'm saying that there's certain things I think we'll learn in the darkness we wouldn't gain otherwise. And if we can learn how to learn the things we need to in the darkness, I believe we can learn to navigate the light even better. Barbara Brown Taylor, in her book, Learning to Walk in the Dark, says it's the inability to bear dark emotions that causes many of our most significant problems. In other words, not the emotions themselves. It's not that we're hurting, it's that We don't know how to process it. And when we can't tolerate the dark, we'll try to find all kinds of artificial lights, including but not limited to drugs, alcohol, shopping, shallow sex, hours in front of a television set or a computer screen. There are no dark emotions, just unskillful ways of coping with emotions we cannot bear. I read that statement, I was like, that's exactly how I feel most of the time. Most of the frustration that I've had and the places that I found myself in pain have been because I didn't know how to process what I was going through. But what do we do when we find ourselves in yet another dark place? How do we wrap our minds around the darkness of brokenness and pain and death? And what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes is not an end-all, beat-all statement. I'm not trying to pretend that I'm Jesus in the flesh that has the wisdom that you need to get through your pain, because the reality is Easter was Jesus going through the darkness, not having the darkness taken away from him. But if you've ever hurt and lost and desperately struggled to just move on, you felt like you couldn't get your mind around what you were experiencing, here's what I want you to know. You were never designed to. You weren't meant to process death and brokenness and injustice. You weren't created for those things, and you weren't designed to experience and then understand those things. So if you struggle like I do to get your mind around things and you get frustrated with yourself about how long you take, I hope this morning just gives you a chance to breathe a little bit. That you could take like a breath of fresh air and give yourself a break. And I know what some of you are already thinking. I don't need to give myself a break because I need to know how to navigate the darkness. The pain is real and it's here now. And we'll get there, but we got to get into how we were designed first. See, we were designed by God for a relationship with God. And out of that relationship, we're given like authority and responsibility over all of creation, including the rest of humanity. So it comes in Genesis 1, the very first chapter in Scripture. It says this: God created human beings in his own image. Now, real quick, some of you are like, I don't believe in creation. That's fine. I don't care. Like, that's not the significant argument that we're going to have. We're a church for real people. All that's welcome here. I don't need you to believe the word created. That's not what's going to stress me out. What I want you to focus on is the fact that we were designed for something. Designed with a purpose. And regardless of how you think all that happened and the way all of that went down, we can recognize that we were designed by a creator for something. Just consider it this morning. He says, in the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And then he blessed them and he said, be fruitful and multiply. I like that one, right? Fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground. And then God said, look, I've given you every seed-bearing plant throughout the earth and all the fruit trees for your food. I've given you every green plant as food for the wild animals and birds in the sky and all the small animals that scurry along the ground, everything that has life. And that is what happened. And then God looked over all that he had made and said, it was very good. Like there's this recognition that God's like, I'm done. Like humanity is here. Like this is the pinnacle of my creation. This is the pinnacle of what I was trying to do. It's finished. It's good. And then in the next chapter, we see this, like, look at like what's going on in this creation. It says, at last, this is Adam, like the first man talking. He says, this one is bone from my bone, talking about his wife, and flesh from my flesh. She'll be called woman because she was taken from man. Now the man and his wife were both naked, but they felt no shame. And this is what I want to lean into. What would it be like if we felt no shame? Like this right here is like pre-things going wrong. This right here is what we were originally designed for. But what would it be like to be naked? Not so much like physically naked, although that could work, but emotionally and mentally, psychologically naked, exposed, completely authentic, and not feel any shame about anything. We wouldn't have to spend our days trying to hide the real us between how well we take care of others, how many trophies we earn, or how unique and special we are. We could just put the real us out there, and our friends, our family, the God of the universe, even us, we could look at ourselves in the mirror and be satisfied with exactly what we see. I'm not saying that's not what you're experiencing, but how different would that be? See, in the beginning, that's the way it was, perfect and shame-free, and then something changes. The original man and woman decided to do what we've all done. They go their own direction. They go, look, God, we understand that you set up some boundaries, but I know best. I'm going to do me. I'm going to live my own truth. I'm going to go my own way, and I'm just going to trust that it's going to work out. And unfortunately for them, like unfortunately for us, it just doesn't work out that way. It seems to always lead to more destruction than we thought and more pain than we ever planned on. And the story is recorded in Genesis 3. It's the very next chapter. It says, at the moment that they stepped out, at the moment that they sinned, at the moment that they did their own thing and said, God, your boundaries are good for you, but not for me. At that moment, their eyes were opened. They suddenly felt shame at their nakedness. So they sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves. That's really an inadequate covering, by the way. And when the cool evening breeze was blowing, the man and his wife heard the Lord God walking about in the garden. So they hid from the Lord among the trees. Now, real quick, I just want to help you see this. They were designed for communion with God. They were designed for community with God. That's why God's walking in the garden with them, trying to have a conversation. But they hide. And then it says, then the Lord God called to the man, where are you? I don't think it's that God's confused. He's trying to figure out why they're hiding. The guy replies, I heard you walking in the garden, so I hid. I was afraid because I was naked. See, similar to our stories, stepping outside those boundaries costed them far more than they thought it would, and it brought on things that they never expected. It caused darkness. Darkness full of shame that said they weren't worth anything, and fear that said the worst was yet to come. But I want to ask this question, like pre-Genesis 3, if we could just imagine being there for a moment, what would life be like without fear? How awesome would it be to not be trapped in our heads, consumed with the fear of what's to come? To know deep within our minds that things might not turn out the way that we think they will or the way that we expect them to, but at the end of the day, we can still have hope because it's not in just what we see, it's in who we serve. We could lay down our need for more information. You could lay down your obsession for detailed routines and systems that define and predict every result you're ever going to have. I could run away from my escapism and pain avoidance. And we could learn to just be present, like here, in a moment. Understanding that we can fully experience this in all of its glory, and we don't have to be worried about what's to come. See, it sounds nice, but I'm a fear person, man. So, you're going to tell me that fear is going to, be gone? I just don't believe it's possible. Hey, I'm back on. There we go. But I don't even believe that getting rid of fear is possible at times. And if so, if it is possible, how do we get there? What can we do to make it happen so I can experience, so you can experience a fear-free, a shame-free world? Now, here's the reality, and this is the worst news I'm going to give you this morning, and then things are going to get better. The reality is you can do absolutely nothing to get back to good. Matchbox 20 had a song called Getting Back to Good. It was on the album or CD, or I guess you could just find it on Spotify, but I don't know what you'd call that. You can just find the track called Getting Back to Good. And it was all about a pursuit, how do we just get things back to good? It had nothing to do with spirituality. It was all about a relationship that had fallen apart. But see, in the end of the day, really what we're dealing with is a relationship that fell apart, a relationship between the God of the universe and his humanity that fell apart not because he failed, but because we failed. Because we said we're going to step outside and do our own thing. And we just want to get back to good. And it's well, that's impossible because you already fell short. But the beauty of Easter is this. The beauty of Easter is that the God of the universe, who does not need us, looks at us and says, I'll take care of it. And no amount of effort or tape or patchwork is going to be able to fix what you've broken on your end, but I'll do it. I'm willing and I'm able to do what you can't so that you can get back to how you were designed to be. So we can get back into a relationship with him. And here's what he says. Paul writes this. He says, God in all of his fullness was pleased to live in Christ. And through him, God reconciled everything back to himself. He made peace with everything in heaven and on earth by means of Christ's blood on the cross. This includes you who were once far away from God. That right there is what we celebrate this morning. That is Easter. Christmas is more fun. You get more presents. But Christmas ultimately is a message of God with us. And while that's great, it does nothing if God is not for us. Because God with me doesn't help me if he's unable to help me through my trouble, if he's able to lead me out of my darkness. And so the message of Christmas is God with us. The message of Easter is God is for us. So if you're new this morning, and there's a lot of new people in here, and we're glad about that, but if you're new this morning, I want you to know something. Your friend, your family member, your coworker invited you today because they want you to understand this reality and consider it above everything else. What if the God of the universe is for you? You go, but I have too much pain. The world's too dark. How could God be for me? They want you here to consider the reality that God may just be for you, and that the work Jesus did on the cross and the work God did through his resurrection is the only reason and the only way we can escape the darkness that we're surrounded by and return to what we were designed to do. And here's the thing, if that was it, like if God stops there and goes, hey, I want to reconcile things so that one day you can have hope for eternity that's not painful. One day you can have hope for heaven, however you define that. If that's where he had stopped and just said, look, I'm just going to provide a way to reconcile you to me eventually, that would have been enough, and it would have been far more than we deserved, because what we deserved was the darkness that we experience. But he didn't stop there. He doesn't stop at providing hope for heaven one day. He gives us tools that we need to navigate the darkness today. He doesn't wait until we just get there. He says, I want you to experience a better life now. And so here's what I want you to know. Over the next several weeks, we're going to be doing a series called Navigating the Darkness. It's all about what to do when the darkness doesn't end, when you find the light switch and it doesn't seem to make any difference. If you've ever felt like life is dark, the world is dark, I have so many questions, so many frustrations, I just don't get it, this series is for you. And over the next 6 to 8 weeks, we're going to be talking about the tools we need to learn to navigate the darkness. And there's going to be some things, some truths that we're going to learn in the darkness that we just wouldn't learn in the light. And I want to challenge you to be here next week and every week for the next 6, to be a part of that series and to learn some things that are going to help you navigate the darkness and then eventually help you learn to navigate the light. And here's the other thing. I know some of you guys aren't really close. Like, I've got friends here that came from like the other side of Frederick. Like, driving to Element every Sunday an hour isn't always going to be realistic. But I want to encourage you to tune in online. We have Facebook Live with the messages. We've got YouTube. We've got our podcast. But the other thing I want to encourage you to do is let us know that. Shoot me an email, ryan@elementchurchlaurel.com, or just post it on Facebook or post it on YouTube. Like, make a comment. And here's why. Because we want to help you create community. We believe there is a ton of value in being part of a community. We're not meant to do life alone. You're not meant to do life alone. And so, yes, you can tune in to a podcast or a sermon and get some hope and get some Jesus in your life. But if you're not doing it in community, it's ultimately probably going to fall short of helping you actually experience something different. And so if you'll just let us know where you are and what's going on, not only will we be praying for you and be praying with you, but we're going to want to connect you to some other Element people all over the place, because we have people who listen in Towson. We got people who listen in Frederick. We got people who are listening in Pittsburgh. I've got good friends that listen in Reisterstown and people who are listening across the country in California. Like, we want to connect you with some other people, whether it be here or at a local church closer to you, that you can actually experience community. Because we believe community is one of the keys to navigating the darkness. But before we leave, I want you to consider one last thing. Where do you stand with God personally? Like, where are you with him? Does he exist? Are you not sure? If he is there, are you good? I don't know. Like, where do you stand with him? The work Jesus did on the cross wasn't just for humanity, it was for you personally. See, Paul kept going in Colossians 1, and he says, you were his enemies, separated from him by your evil thoughts and actions. Yet now he has reconciled you to himself through the death of Christ in his physical body. As a result, he brought you into his own presence. And you are as holy and blameless as you stand before him without a single fault. The reality is, it's like, hey, we did what it took to separate ourselves from God. We stepped out on our own. We stepped outside of his boundaries, and he goes, I got you. You don't deserve for me to get you, but I got you. I'll take care of it. And then Paul writes in another letter to a church in Rome, he says, listen, if you'll just confess, if you'll openly declare that Jesus is Lord, and you'll believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. And I don't know about you, but that seems too simple. That seems too basic. I talked about this a few weeks ago in our last series, but I have a hard time believing in a grace that requires nothing of me. Because what I've learned throughout my life is that things that sound too good to be true normally are. All the 0% financing that's out there, and I'm like, it just doesn't make any sense, turns out to not be actually 0% financing. All the things that are like, we're going to pay you 4 times your house value have not worked out, even though I've called multiple times. All of the African family members I have that want to send me money still haven't. And we laugh about it and we joke about it, but the reality is we all understand this. That things that sound too good to be true just are. Nothing in life seems to just sound that good and actually be that true. But here's the reality. Grace, what's so amazing about grace is that there is nothing we can do to make God love us any more, and absolutely nothing we can do to make God love us any less. Grace requires nothing of us. How much different would life be if we just embraced that? If we'd stop trying to earn something we've already been given? I think we could root ourselves deep within our guts and even deeper within our souls. That the mistakes we've made and the tension that they've caused aren't going to be the permanent way that things are, because a good God already did a great work of taking care of it so that the guilty, you and me, can walk around in freedom. So as the band comes back up, I want to challenge you to something. If we can actually believe that, here's what difference I think it's going to make. We can step out of our defensive posture. We can set aside our anger. We can release our stress to just make all things right, and we can trust that God has, God is, and God will make things right in his time. Because of Easter, your fears can be quieted. Because of Easter, your shame can be negated. Because of Easter, your guilt is overcome. Because of Easter, we can have hope. We've been given intrinsic value that can't be taken away, and we can walk in freedom. You're like, I don't know. How do I do it? Well, Paul already told us. The Apostle Paul said, listen, if you declare with your mouth openly that Jesus is Lord, meaning like he's the leader of your life, you're going to submit to him even when it doesn't always make sense. And you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. That's Easter. If you come to that, then you will be saved. I'll give you my grace. And you go, well, how do you do that here? I want to do that, but I don't know how. On that connection card that you already filled out, because we're going to be donating to Samaritan Women, on that connection card, just check the box that says, I want to accept Christ and get baptized. Because what we see all throughout the New Testament, what we see all throughout the life of Jesus and then following Jesus, is men and women who said, I want to follow you. I want to declare that, listen, you're going to help lead my life. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to follow you. I'm going to do my best to take what I understand and apply it. And I believe that you were raised from the dead. And then you see those men and women go public and go forward and get baptized. They get dunked underneath some water and raised out. And Jesus says it's like a spiritual burial and resurrection. That you're burying your old self and being raised to a new life. See, because here's the reality. I don't know if you get this or not, but Jesus didn't come to make bad people good. He came to raise dead people back to life. And if that's you, check the box. Let's have a conversation this week, and we can move forward with baptism in the next couple weeks. And we can celebrate that moment. The moment when you came in here running from God and just trying to shut up your friend and actually met Jesus. The moment that maybe when you've been pursuing the God of the universe and you didn't even know if he was real, he showed up in a real way for you. But here's the other thing. Easter this year, in this series of Navigating the Darkness, even if you don't need them, I just want you to know I do. We had a whole different series laid out. This is going to be the longest series we've ever done because I need it. Because as I stand on the stage with lights on me, I find myself feeling like I'm trying to navigate the darkness. Walking into trees, walking into tables, stumping my toes because I can't see anything. And I'm frustrated. And it's painful. And it's hard. And it just seems like the more that I try, the more things pile up. The more effort I put in, the less difference it seems to make. For a guy who's normally filled with so much hope, I'm struggling to even hope at all. And I need to learn. And I need to gain some tools that are going to help me navigate the dark places of my life. We're not doing a series just so I can learn something, but we're doing a series so we can learn something. So I want to encourage you to be here and be a part of that because I believe it's going to be valuable for you. But listen, don't walk out of here today knowing you need to make a decision to begin to trust Jesus and not check that box and create a conversation. Let today be the day on Easter that you go, listen, it's time for me to follow Jesus. And you go, but Ryan, pastor, whoever you are, how do I know that's possible for me? I've done some really awful things, some things that I'm not proud of, some things that I hope nobody ever finds out. I'm with you. How do I know it's possible for me to be forgiven, to get grace, to have value? Because we follow a God who's able to take a blood-stained cross and turn it into an empty tomb. I don't know how God does the miraculous, but I know that he can, and I know that he will. Easter is the reason we have hope. Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for loving us enough to die for us, because we don't deserve that. I deserve a lot worse. I deserve pain and frustration and aggravation. I deserve jail for some things. There's like moments in life where we know we're experiencing darkness and the pain is all around us. And God, here's the reality. Some of us haven't caused our own pain. We're the byproduct of somebody else's mistakes. The byproduct of somebody else stepping outside of what you said was best and doing it their own way. And we're victims of abuse and neglect and betrayal. But God, regardless of how we got here, we find ourselves trying to navigate some really dark places. But Easter is the reminder that when things are dark, you're at work. Jesus was crucified on a Friday, spent Saturday in a grave, all of his followers spent time in hiding, and you were working on resurrecting him. So God, help us to begin to have hope. Not because of who we are, but because of what you've already done. It's in your name I pray. Amen.